Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scale Modeling with Mike Ashey. Today we're going to do a tape-up review of the very fire USS Missouri that came out in 2019. This is a really good kit. It's pretty impressive, and it's a step up from the old Tamiya kit. It's got a lot of surface detail on the superstructure sides. It's got beautifully scribed deck detail. The slight drawback to it is it's got a lot of seam work, a lot more than on the Tamiya kit. But it's a complete kit. It's got all the photo etch you need. So let's get to it and let's start the review.
The shape of the hull is accurate and the superstructure is well model engineered. The main deck is in 3 sections, just like the Tamiya kit. The hull is split in 2 and the seam line will require some work. I recommend also reinforcing the seam line from the inside of the hull with plastic strip to add strength. The seam line at the stern will need to be clamped from the inside of the hull to get it to close. Reinforcement from the inside of the hull in this area is definitely needed to make the glue joint strong. The bow main deck area is nicely detailed and the kit comes with black anchor chain. The splinter shields and the spray shield are separate parts, and this makes it easier to paint the deck. The 16-inch gun turrets are nicely done, and the main guns can be positioned at different elevations. Here again, the splinter shields are separate parts. The fit of the superstructure levels to one another is tight, with almost no voids. The side keels are also molded onto the hull. The stern superstructure buildup is almost identical to the Tamiya kit. Note the plating detail on the hull. The stern splinter shields are also separate parts. The deck chocks are along the edge of the hull, and the deck bits are set slightly back so that the main deck photo etch railings can be set between them. Moving in a bit closer, you can see the wood deck detail. The void between the deck and the side of the hull is because the tape came loose. The splinter shield surface detail is nicely done, and they fit perfectly onto the deck. Some of the surface detail on the sides of the superstructure parts are slightly overdone. However, once the ship is painted, you really won't notice this. This void can be closed up some. However, it will still need some work, just like on the Tamiya Missouri. Note the parts numbering. The surfaces on some of the parts have mold lines, and this will need to be carefully scraped off. The armor tower is in 3 parts, and careful assembly, filling with tiny amounts of superglue, scraping and sanding with a flexifile can fix this multi-piece part. The deck void can be covered with a small length of plastic half round. You can use a round toothpick with a sharpened end to carefully paint the fire hose detail on the superstructure sides. The aft 40mm Beaufort platform has some nice detail on the inside area of the superstructure sides. Here's a close-up of that nice surface detail. Note the mold lines on the sides of the parts. The 16-inch turret tops have some nice detail. By modifying the blast bags, you can change the elevation of each gun. Note that the incline ladders are not molded onto the sides of the superstructure next to the upper turret like they are on the Tamiya kit. The upper superstructure tower is in several parts, so you will need to be very careful when you glue these parts together. The window framing on the enclosed bridge is also a bit thick. The splinter shields on the Bofors platform are much better than on the Tamiya kit. From this view, you can see how well the 20mm splinter shields fit onto the main deck. The starboard aft main deck seam is pretty tight, but there's a slight misalignment between the wood deck scribing. The port aft main deck seam is also tight, and the alignment of the wood deck scribing is much better. The photo-etch railings will sit right over the seam line between the deck and the side of the hull. The starboard forward deck seam is very tight, and I'll show you how to get this tight fit. The superstructure sides are separate parts with the seam at the top of the upper deck level. Check the backside of each superstructure part to ensure that it is flat so you get a tight fit. The tiny void can be filled with white glue once the area is primed. The port side forward deck seam is also very tight. Here's an example of the superstructure to deck seam line. With a flat inside area, pushing this part up against the side of the superstructure while the glue dries will help reduce the tiny void. With multiple deck levels with seams to address, it is very important to check the back sides of each superstructure side part. The wood deck scribing on the O1 level is also very well done, and it matches the main deck scribing. Verifier put a lot of effort into creating surface detail on the sides of the superstructure. The Tamiya kit has almost none. Note how petite the hull plating detail is. The kit's photo-etch sheet M has all of the main deck railings, which are in sections. Photo sheet N has a catapult parts as well as a lot of small detail parts. Photo-etch sheet P has the aircraft crane, the radars, and more small parts. I recommend using 3D printed parts from Black Cat models for the 20mm, the 40mm, the twin 5-inch 38 mounts, and the Mark 37 radars. This will eliminate a lot of tedious assemblies. Here is a comparison between the Tamiya and the Verifier O1 and O2 levels. The Tamiya kit is just one part, but lacks any surface detail. These parts are very similar, except for the separate armored conning tower. These two aft superstructure parts are almost identical. Here, the parts breakdown between the Verifier and Tamiya kits is almost the opposite of the lower deck parts breakdown. Here you can clearly see the forward superstructure seams that will have to be carefully filled, scraped, and sanded smooth. The Tamiya kit parts are just left and right sides. The aft smokestacks build up very differently between the two kits. These two parts are very similar in shape, except that the Verifier assembly has more parts. The hatch detail throughout the superstructure sides of the Verifier kit is much better than the Tamiya kit. The 16-inch guns assemble very differently, and it's easier to change the elevation of individual barrels on the Verifier kit. The parts breakdown on the twin 5-inch turret sides is the same on both kits. I recommend replacing them with 3D printed parts from Black Cat models. The kit's quad bofors should also be replaced with 3D printed parts from Black Cat models. I also recommend using Gold Medal Models USS Missouri Photo-etch set for the search radar, the rangefinder radars, the catapults, and the aircraft crane. The forward deck section is slightly longer, and it will need to be trimmed so that the center deck section will sit level. The amount of decking that will need to be removed from the edge of the forward deck is about 1/16 of an inch. The shape of the Tamiya Missouri bow on the right is different than the Verifier kit. Once the bow 20mm platform is attached to the Verifier kit, the sharper bow appearance will be much less noticeable.
Hi everybody. I hope you enjoyed the tape-up review of the Verifier 1:350th scale Missouri. It's a great kit. Just be diligent on your seam work and it'll build up into a beautiful model. Have a great day and be safe.